Hey everyone. So today I have the return of a very special guest to the channel. I would call him the godfather of the architectural uprising movement or the new urbanist movement. And I mean, was such a pleasure to have last time, and we're going to welcome him back. It's the founder of the architectural uprising movement, Michael Diamant. Hello.
Thank you very much for that very nice introduction. Yeah, and well, good day to you. It's evening here in Stockholm, but I guess it's quite early in LA.
Yeah, it's a little early, but nothing too crazy. But it's important to have this discussion because these ideas are coming from all over the world and it's really
Yeah.
changing the way that people talk about urbanism. And I think today you're going to present something I think that is actually pretty groundbreaking in this whole discussion because we hear all the time about the supposed conflict of interests between the transit enthusiasts and the beauty enthusiasts as if they're two
Mm.
separate, mutually exclusive things. And I think today you have something that actually really brings these two things, these two forces together and shows that they're actually quite synonymous. So please, what have you got to talk to us about?
Yeah, it's kind of fun, how because this movement is so big now. So I get sent uh, research from my own country that I did not know about.
Hmm.
So last year, and it is in English, so everyone can take and read about it. There was a survey or a research paper in Sweden where they checked why people choose to walk, why they choose specifically why they choose to walk to work, and why they take cars. And what they found out was that the most important factor why people walk to work is beauty. If the surroundings are beautiful, and they are not relativists because they are not architects that did this study, they are focused on health. If the surroundings were beautiful, that was the key component why people choose to walk. So what we have here is clear, now we have science backing that up as again. So the transit community that I would say that the walkability community that may be a bit focused on, just, creating density, they must acknowledge that the environments that are created must be beautiful. And beauty is, as we mentioned a million times, is not relative. It's measurable. And what people find beautiful is very, very similar, according to all surveys and according to neuroscience research as well, because beauty is biological. It's not subjective or culture. It's very, very much biological. So yeah, that is groundbreaking in many ways. All these studies should have been done many, many years ago, but of
Right.
course they haven't been done many, many years ago because there is no interest from the architect community to make these surveys. So all these surveys and all this research is coming from non-architects communities, and how to say people that are not affiliated traditionally with faculties of architecture and urbanism. So this was a health research at a Swedish university that made this research. So yeah,
Okay. Would you say that beauty as defined in the study was outlined in a way that describes it as something that is buildings that are built in the classical tradition, streets that are laid out in a classical style? How was beauty just defined in this study? Because a lot of people will hear this and go, "Well, beauty is is
mm,
subjective, and what one person might think is beautiful, another person will think is ugly, and vice versa." So, is it clear in the study what they mean by a beautiful street, a beautiful pathway?
unfortunately not. That's because I tell you, because they are not part of like an architecture faculty or an urban department. They just define, they ask people what they thought, what makes you walk, and made a research about this. Of course, what how they illustrated beauty. That was, of course, a classical environment. But no, they didn't define it because they probably thought it was self-obvious because they are not at architecture studies or, or urban studies. So that may be one problem. But on the other hand, I don't think it's a big problem at all anyway, because it doesn't matter. We can bring a million studies in the face of all these modernists, and they will not care. They will try to delegitimize these studies anyway. So now we know, we that already know what beauty is, the overwhelming majority that has no, haven't gone to school of relativism and thought about, no, there is no, there is no objective beauty. Everything's just subjective. We know what is beautiful. Those people that they interviewed in the study, they were non-architects. So they, of course, have a very, clearly defined thing, what is beauty. They know it when they see it, and it is the classical environments. So yeah, okay. And if one want to if one have this subjective view of beauty, then one can complement this study with a study about what environments people found beautiful.
Right.
But here they made the conclusion that when they interviewed people, when they asked people, beautiful built environment was the most important factor why people choose to walk. They will not walk in ugly environments. They only
Mhm.
walk in beautiful built environments.
How substantial are the numbers in terms of that? Like what was the like how dramatic was the result?
Well, it was overwhelming. Uh, Without going into specific details, I will, we will link to the study so everyone
Hmm.
can read it. Overwhelming. It was, the key factor. If we want, if people choose to walk, it was because their environments were beautiful. Otherwise,
Hmm.
they didn't. So it was
Right.
like, yeah, 100%. People don't walk to work because of exercise reasons. They walk to work because it gives them, peace of mind,
Hmm.
a nice morning stroll. That's why they choose to walk. So it was nothing about exercise, but the end result is, of course, improved health because people will walk and
Hmm.
they will move
Hmm.
more. Because, uh, yeah, everyone knows, a big problem with the modern world is 80% of our time we spend sitting.
Hmm.
Mm.
Absolutely. Uh,
Yeah.
and I also say that the study was it conducted in Stockholm?
It was conducted in Stockholm, yes.
Yeah, so I would think that because it's in Stockholm, there's such a contrast between the old and the new that it makes it
Yeah.
more obvious what they mean. Whereas if it was conducted, say, in Los Angeles, where I live, might be a little more complicated because there's so many different the contrast isn't just as stark, really, between the
Yeah,
old and the
the
new.
contrast
So
talk and the difference in walkability. Much larger part of Stockholm is walkable than compared to LA.
right.
But not all parts of Stockholm are beautiful, far from it. Only the central part of Stockholm is beautiful. The rest is
Hmm.
a modernist wasteland, more or less.
Hmm.
So there people choose not to walk. There they take their cars, they take mass transit. So walking is very, very exclusive for the beautiful parts of
Right.
the city. And
Right.
that is, the big takeaway. One can question this research. One can say, oh, it's only one paper. But then, of course, this is something that should be researched more on then. This study can be replicated in many cities and by many universities. So that's the big thing. One study will never, convince anyone. But here we have something that I think, as you said, can bring many different, feeds together, and we can make, we don't need to draw strong conclusion from this one if we don't
Hmm.
want to.
Hmm.
Or for me, and probably for you, it's very intuitive that this is correct.
Right.
When
Right.
we think of ourselves, why do I choose to walk in certain areas, and why do I choose
Exactly.
to walk in other areas? But nothing is intuitive in today's world. Everything is so relative all the time.
Right.
So here we have something, make another study.
Hmm. But it is so intuitive is the thing.
Mm.
And you notice from your own life that people like to go to beautiful places. That's where people take their Instagram photos. That's where people like to go on picnics and dates and go out with their family on weekends. Like you just know this from your own life. And this
Yeah,
idea that, and I understand that people that have more of an urbanist brain might, overlook certain factors such as beauty because they're thinking so consciously about their mode of travel. But most people aren't like that. Most people are just going about their lives and just following wherever is available to them and just going with the flow. And when people do that, they
they're very
tend to just gravitate towards beautiful places. And by beautiful, we mean in the classical tradition,
Mm.
and that's where they gravitate towards to do things that are not in the car, most
Yeah,
importantly.
exactly.
Hmm.
And it's not like walking is an activity. It's not an
Right.
act. It's just something that you do when you're in a
Hmm.
beautiful environment. And I think this study can be complemented by another study also, of course, because I am situated in Sweden, I will mention Swedish
Of
research, but they are
course.
all in English. Um,
Right.
so another study from Lund University from 2017, where they ask, we have, we don't have mayors in Sweden. We have municipalities, and different, cities are in different municipalities. So many municipalities, they want, their downtowns to be alive. So they have something called, not city managers, but center managers.
Hmm.
And they asked 109 center managers in Sweden. We have around, I think, 320 municipalities. So that's a one third of,
Wow.
all municipalities in Sweden. That's kind of a lot. And they asked them what type of architecture will bring visitors to the center of the city. And again, overwhelming response from this city manager or center managers, classical architecture. They
Right.
didn't ask them about style. They showed them six different photos, and you
Hmm.
can bring that. We can cut it in this podcast
Yep.
to pick it. What I mean,
Of course.
they asked them what type of architecture do you think will bring visitors to the center? And overwhelmingly, classical architecture. They choose classical
Wow.
architecture, modernist architecture. So, how do you say these two studies combine gives
Right.
an indication and is very intuitive. Everything is like political almost. So
Yeah.
you believe it, I believe it, it
Yeah.
feels intuitive, most people believe it. And then we will ask a modernist, and he will try
Hmm.
to cut down the research by some relativist nonsense. No, if beauty is not exactly defined, then it cannot be true. Some
Hmm.
people may think that an ugly gray box with, a strange fenestration is beautiful, all that nonsense. And
Right.
and what can 109 center managers
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
They will not believe it. So
Right.
well, the only thing with the research now is that it confirms your own intuition. And those
Hmm.
people on the other side, the modernists, they don't have any intuition because everything's just ideological. They will go to the bottom with the ship, with the
Hmm.
modernist ship. They don't care
Right.
about,
Right.
I'm sorry to sounding so radical. You know
No,
that
it's
I'm radical.
okay. But
But
even the
it's
people that aren't radically modernist, but they just say, "Oh, well, I believe in well, I don't particularly have a preference for traditional architecture because I care about cost and efficiency
Mm,
and that
mm,
sort of thing." Which is what a lot
mm.
of particularly YIMBYists talk about. They're like, it doesn't really matter the architectural style. I just want these newer, better places to be built. But I think what this
Mm.
shows people is that, well, for it to be better, it has to incorporate something classical. Because
Yes,
if not, it's just like what the city managers were describing is that, in the places in Sweden where people can walk and be pedestrians, which is in the center, they're only really going to want to do it if it's actually classical. So
yes,
it
it's
all comes
beautiful.
together. It all comes together.
Yeah. And it's the same thing, why you will not, if there is a beautiful surrounding, the
Hmm.
shopping will be a social event. You will sit at a cafe, you will meet your friends after you've done it and stuff.
Hmm.
If the city center is ugly, modernist, then it will not be a social event.
Right.
Then you will not go there, then you will shop online. So this is also, in the competition with online shopping, beauty is very important as well.
Hmm.
But we will link to both these studies uh,
Absolutely.
in this podcast so people can read them for themselves, and then
Hmm.
they will make up. It's the people in the middle that we convince, basically.
Hmm.
So the how to say independent voters, as you call it in the US.
Right, right.
Maybe those, those on our side, they will just take it for granted, and the modernists, they will refuse to believe anything. We can show them 100 scientific papers and they will discard them because it
Hmm.
doesn't approve with their worldview.
Well, what is it about the modernists that insists that they're right, even though everything about human nature and all the evidence that comes out about it says otherwise.
Uh, we have touched this subject before, but it's very much about their identity
Hmm.
because what they are sold at universities is an identity. So it's not that, they do architecture. How to say, they have a list avant I mentioned it so many times, but this avant-garde view of themselves as artists. That's how they view themselves. So it's a
Hmm.
threat to their identity, all this, science. And if the science proves that everything they believe in is wrong, then it's soul crushing. So you rather believe in a beautiful lie than in an ugly
Hmm.
truth.
Hmm.
Ugly truth for them, at least. For us, it's a very beautiful truth.
Hmm.
Um, so that is why there is such a stiff resistance, and that is why they cannot be reformed, because they are so heavily invested in this identity that they know something that no one else did. We are a special group of people that understand this ugliness, and we are
Right.
more educated than the masses. So, in that regard, they cannot be convinced, they cannot be reformed if they don't do it themselves. They can only be replaced by classical architects.
Hmm.
So the battle, when we have these debates and when we have discussions, it's never about convincing them because they cannot be convinced. It's to convince the middle ground and also to convince the general audience that have no ideological stake in the field of architecture, just know what they instinctively feel that it is correct.
Hmm. Well, I think it's just really important to point all this out because, every time we ever bring up anything about the importance of beauty, it gets shot down as irrelevant. So
Mm.
we have to make it as relevant as possible. And I
Yeah.
think fulfilling their worldview, which is I think the correct worldview, which is that we should move away from a car-centric society into a pedestrian style
Mm.
society, we have
Yeah.
to do that in the right way. We have to do that in a way that is as enjoyable as possible. Do it without forcing people. Do it because people are
Mm.
happy and willing to participate
Yes,
in that society.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, because I get so tired about, now we should destroy the suburbs. No, we should not destroy the suburbs. We should
Hmm.
make people want to leave them themselves.
Right.
But there is a reason that the suburbs exist and that there is demand for them. Okay, now I love to, how should I translate it? Say
Hmm.
controversial things about US cities, just from my
No,
view,
this
a
is
book.
okay. This is
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
But security is a big issue
Right. Right.
in cities. And if you have now with the uh, tensions and everything, I just see things from abroad
Hmm.
with racial tensions and sons, and the police cannot do a proper work. That will not bring middle class families.
Hmm.
If you don't feel secure in the city, you will not move there.
Hmm.
That's number one. Number two, and I mentioned this many times as well, is the lack of courtyard urbanism in the US cities. What you have is, this tower urbanism is not very attractive if you have a family.
No.
So what you get is just, urban educated singles, that category. But they don't make
Hmm.
a city. They just,
Hmm.
trans, you have to correct my English now, they're just there for a short while
Right.
until they get a family and then they move to the suburbs.
It's a
So
temporary arrangement.
yes, a very, very temporary arrangement.
Hmm.
So that's why I'm so happy that I found a new account on Twitter, of course. Yeah,
Hmm.
Alicia Courtier Urbanism. She's a very, very vocal and very, very well-spoken American
Hmm.
woman
Hmm.
that lived in Florence with
Hmm.
three kids, and used to live in one of these amazing courtyards that there is there. And now she moved to Chicago,
Hmm.
and she noticed the difference, between having a yard and a true closed courtyard.
Right.
So she has become a very big advocate for courtyard urbanism, and that's what needed. A million more accounts that do the same, just like you do. She does it as well now. US is a
Hmm.
continent, 320 million people. You are quite many. So there,
Yeah.
there's needed, many, many voices that say the same thing.
Right.
So for you to have, you have courtyard urbanism in, what was it, Santa Barbara in California. You have
Yeah.
this, yeah, Spanish course. So security and courtyard urbanism and not this urban decay with homeless
Right.
and drug addicts and all these things. You can have this false compassion a million times, but the only thing
Right.
is you shoot yourself in the foot. You will get no proper urbanism with that. You
Absolutely.
will have people fleeing to the suburbs, and they will be extremely NIM-based because they will see
Hmm.
every type of density as now there will come people that will destroy our urban neighborhood.
Right. Well, to use one of the favorite phrases of urbanism or of urbanists, build it and they will come. So you have
Yeah,
to make a place beautiful, make it appealing
yeah,
to families from the get-go. You can't just
yeah.
expect it to happen over
Mm,
time or forcefully make that happen. It has to be like that from the beginning, and that's how people will come and make places more walkable, make families walk more instead of driving everywhere. And but it
mm,
starts by building beautifully. It starts by actually making it attractive. And
yeah,
maybe it is a worldview difference. There are people who think that we have to tax people or add fees to monetarily incentivize people to live a different lifestyle without fixing the core of the problem.
yeah.
But I don't believe in that. I believe that you actually make an option that is so overwhelmingly attractive, regardless of whatever uh, monetary incentives, and people will make that decision.
Yeah, it's the fable, about the sun and the wind,
Hmm.
They compete, they wanted to test who was the strongest. And you
Hmm.
have a man with a coat that walks under them, and the wind begins, and it blows and blows and blows and blows, and the man just, puts his coat harder and harder around him. Then it's
Hmm.
the sun's turn, and the sun shines, and the man lies down and takes off his coat.
Right.
So by making it attractive and being nice, you come much, much, much further than trying to force and legislate and everything. So you have to fix some problems, but make it an attractive option. With that said, not everyone will want to live in a city. I think, mostly urban courtyard urbanism is, two child families.
Hmm.
If you have more than two children, I think a larger percentage will want a villa or something like that. But that doesn't mean that the suburbs have to be totally soulless. If you look at old suburbs across Europe, and you probably have them in the States as well. Yes, of course you have them in the States as well. They are very different creatures from modern suburbia. What you have is, you have villas and you have beautiful small squares dotted inside all these villa areas. You have villas that are larger, that are, apartment villas. So it can be a big villa, but it can be three families in them. So you have denser, more beautifully planned, and they are connected to mass transit. You usually in the US and in many European cities, uh, you used to have tram to all these villa areas. So they are much more urban and they are much more denser, but still very, very, very enjoyable to live. And yeah, more space if you have a larger family. So on one hand, reform the inner cities, and on the other, reform the suburbs as well, connect them more, make larger multifamily villas, make small squares where you have, 3, 4 story apartment buildings. So you create, how to say, a little denser and more livable landscape where people don't need to commute. Because one thing that's really destructive is all the commuting that suburbia,
Of course.
facilitates.
But make it beautiful because even where I live in LA, they are trying to do the densify certain
Mm.
corners and whatnot. But the problem is that they're not building anywhere that's that impressive. So it doesn't have that pedestrian effect that you would want,
No.
which is so crucial for actually landing these better cities, better neighborhoods. Because if people aren't out on the streets and they're still in their cars, it doesn't really matter what you're building. It's still you're still not really fixing the problem, at least in terms of car centricity. So I think that's
No.
the main takeaway from all that.
Yeah, very much so. You have this big trend now with TODs, transit-oriented developments, and they look horrific. It's like, okay, we built this 50-story tower over the train station. Okay, will it create a nice area where people want to live? No, it will create, uh, cells where urban singers live and they can commute easily. But the effect on surroundings will not be that good. it will create, urban slums. There will be junkies, there will be everything close to this transit. It will not be, the watchful middle class family eyes that, calls politicians as soon as you see something, some kind of social disturbance. So it's very, very bad, these transit-oriented developments. And I think I mentioned to you before, and maybe we can show your viewers as well, how they do these transit-oriented developments in the Paris area. Because they do them, yeah, I know sometimes you can learn from the French, not always, but sometimes. Um, they do these things very, very great. So they make very, very beautiful 4 or 5 story courtyard urbanist developments,
Hmm.
and they dig down the parking. So parkings are on the ground for commuters, and at the same time they make a small, attractive little, city center or something
Right.
at the same
And this
time.
is what attracts
So they
families. This is what
bring,
attracts people who bring in, a
yeah,
bit of a decent income, but it ensures that that area is going to be safe and friendly for children
yes,
and therefore
mm,
friendly for everybody. Because what people I
yeah,
think don't
because
realize is
this,
that just because something is friendly for families and for people with a middle
mm,
income, it doesn't restrict everybody else. Everyone else can go
no,
and enjoy that same space.
yes, everyone else benefits from these watchful families. Everyone benefits. Because one thing when you're 20 or 25 in an urban single, you're not that engaged in the area where you live. You're very you're movable. You walk around, you sleep all day, and you party in the evening, and you study. But when you're, with a family, as soon as you see something that you don't like, what you call them, Karens in the news or something, yeah, then you're calling your local politician and you're screaming that there is something that you don't like. You will call police on any, suspectful people. And people can joke about this as much as well, but these people will make the area safe for everyone. And that's, the good thing. They will make this transit-oriented development nice, clean, safe, beautiful for everyone. Instead of that, it will be, some shady place where people just go, yeah, they go to commute and then they never want to spend a minute there. And also they
Mhm.
make it safe, in the evening, so there will be no, suspicious activity, because all these transit areas, they of course attract drug dealers. They do it
Hmm.
everywhere because there it's very
Hmm.
easy for them to meet their clients.
Hmm.
And if you build modernism, you have all these, shady corners and you know, strange bridges and some pedestrian bridges where you can
Right.
hide it.
Places where people don't
Yeah,
want to be,
yeah,
essentially. Hmm.
yeah. Then you get these people, and you don't want them there.
All right. Well, I think that will conclude this segment of our conversation. If you want to see the rest of this conversation, head over to my Patreon page. You can join. It's only $2 per month. And there you can see the rest of the conversation with Michael Diamant.
Mm. And
And
I
all right.
can recommend, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
nej,
no, please.
no, but I highly recommend people to subscribe to your Patreon because I'm very impressed what you do, and I've been very impressed by the videos that you upload about, about different American cities, how they used to be, because that's so important to bring this message up because
Hmm.
most of us, almost all of us, were born after all this destruction took place. So we take all the ugliness, all the, the dystopia that we see for granted. We don't know anything else. And when you see what cities used to look like, it's like something was really stolen from us.
Yeah.
And we want, so yeah, so definitely join his Patreon and subscribe to his channel.
Thank
He's
you
really,
so
really good.
much.
And I'm
Thank
very
you.
impressed what he's doing.
Thank you so much. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye bye. And of course, a massive shout out to my Master Architect tier members, Michael Goldman, Jean Baptista, and my dad.